I stood in the back corner of the bridal suite at the Rosewood Estate in Charleston, South Carolina, watching my younger sister Vanessa twirl in her custom Vera Wang gown while my mother dabbed at happy tears. Nobody had asked me to help with the buttons. Nobody had asked me to hold the veil. I was just there occupying space the way I had occupied space at every family gathering for the past 8 years since I dropped out of medical school. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The failure. The disappointment. The one we don't talk about. What none of them knew as they fussed over Vanessa's perfect day was that the groom, Marcus Chen, had signed his employment contract with my company exactly 14 months ago. He reported directly to me. I was his boss. And in about 3 hours during the reception toasts, that particular detail was about to detonate like a bomb in the middle of my family's carefully constructed narrative about my worthless life. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to explain how I ended up in this position, standing in the shadows of my sister's spotlight, holding a secret that would either destroy what remained of my family relationships, or finally force them to see me as I actually was. My name is Rebecca Ann Lawson. I am 32 years old. For the past 6 years, I have served as the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of Meridian Analytics, a data science consulting firm based in Austin, Texas. We employ 73 people across 4 offices. Last year, our revenue exceeded $22 million. By any objective measure, I have built something remarkable from nothing, transforming a boutique 2-person operation into a thriving mid-sized firm that works with Fortune 500 clients on some of their most complex analytical challenges. My family knows none of this. They know that I dropped out of the prestigious Johns Hopkins medical program at age 24, 3 years into the curriculum, just before clinical rotations would have begun. They know that I moved to Austin shortly after and that I work with computers. They have never asked what exactly I do with computers. They have never inquired about my company. They have never requested details about my work or expressed curiosity about my life in Texas. In their minds, I abandoned a guaranteed path to respect and prosperity to do something vague and probably insignificant with technology, which they understand poorly and value not at all. My parents, Dr. Richard Lawson and Dr. Patricia Lawson, are both physicians. My father is a cardiac surgeon at Charleston Memorial Hospital, where he has practiced for 34 years. My mother is a pediatrician with a private practice in the historic district. They met during residency, married young, and built a life defined by professional prestige, country club memberships, and a social circle comprised entirely of other doctors and their families. Vanessa, my younger sister by 4 years, followed the approved path. She completed her undergraduate degree at Duke, attended the Medical University of South Carolina for medical school, and recently finished her residency in dermatology. She is everything our parents wanted both their daughters to be. Dr. Vanessa Lawson, soon to be Dr. Vanessa Chun, beautiful and accomplished and safely within the bounds of acceptability. Then there is me, the dropout, the one who threw away her future. The source of whispered disappointment at holiday dinners and sympathetic head shakes from my parents' friends who remember when I was the promising one, the daughter who scored a perfect on her MCATs and got into Hopkins on her first application. I had not wanted to come to this wedding. When the invitation arrived at my Austin condo 6 months ago, I had held it in my hands for 20 minutes, debating whether I could manufacture a work emergency important enough to justify my absence. But Vanessa had called me personally, her voice carrying that particular blend of sweetness and expectation that made refusal feel impossible. You have to be there, Becca. You're my only sister. I know things have been weird with Mom and Dad, but this is my wedding. You can put that aside for one day, can you not? Weird was an interesting word choice for the dynamic where our parents barely spoke to me and introduced me to their friends as their other daughter, the one in Texas, with the kind of vocal inflection that suggested Texas was somewhere slightly shameful like prison or rehab. But she was my sister. Despite everything, despite the years of being compared unfavorably to her achievements, despite the 1,000 small ways she had accepted and even benefited from our parents' differential treatment, she was still my sister. We had shared a bathroom growing up. She had been the first person I told when I got my acceptance to Hopkins. I had helped her study for her organic chemistry exams during her pre-med years at Duke, so I had said yes. I arranged to be away from the office for 5 days, the longest absence since I had founded Meridian. I booked a room at a boutique hotel in downtown Charleston, rather than staying at my parents' house. A boundary I had established years ago that caused ongoing offense, but which I maintained religiously. I packed conservative dresses appropriate for wedding events and tried to prepare myself mentally for the onslaught of judgment and dismissal that invariably accompanied any time spent with my family. What I had not prepared for was discovering that the groom was someone I knew professionally. I had met Marcus Chen exactly once in person 14 months ago, when he interviewed for a senior data scientist position at Meridian. He had been working at a smaller firm in San Francisco and was looking to relocate to Austin for family reasons. His credentials were impeccable. A PhD in statistics from Stanford, 5 years of industry experience, and a publication record that demonstrated both technical skill and the ability to communicate complex concepts clearly. I had conducted the final interview myself, as I did for all senior hires. We had talked for 90 minutes about his dissertation research, his approach to ensemble modeling techniques, and his philosophy about the balance between methodological rigor and business practicality. He was brilliant and humble and exactly the kind of person I wanted on my team. I had offered him the position at the end of that conversation. He had accepted 2 days later. He started 3 weeks after that. For the past year and 2 months, he had reported to me through our organizational structure. We had worked together on multiple projects. I had approved his salary increases, reviewed his performance evaluations, and signed off on his promotion to lead data scientist 6 months ago. I had known his last name was Chun. I had known he was engaged to someone in Charleston. I had not known that someone was my sister. The realization had hit me like a physical blow 3 months ago, when Marcus mentioned in a team meeting that he would need time off in May for his wedding. He had been apologetic about the timing, knowing we had a major client deliverable that same month. As he explained the dates and location, I had felt my stomach drop. Charleston. Memorial Day weekend. Marrying someone named Vanessa. After the meeting, I had pulled up his personnel file and reviewed his emergency contact information, which I had not looked at since his hiring paperwork had been processed. There it was in plain administrative text. Vanessa Lawson, fiancée, with a Charleston phone number I recognized because it was only 2 digits different from my parents' number. For several minutes, I had simply stared at my computer screen, trying to process the implications. My sister was marrying someone who worked for me, someone I had hired, someone whose career advancement and compensation I directly influenced. And neither of them knew. Marcus had never asked about my family. Our relationship was professionally cordial but not personally intimate. He knew I had family on the East Coast because I occasionally mentioned visiting them, but I had never specified where or provided details. My last name was different from Vanessa's married name would be, so there was no obvious connection. My parents' social circles and Marcus's professional world did not overlap in ways that would have triggered recognition. On Vanessa's side, she knew I worked in Austin and that my company did something with data. She had never asked the name of my company, my specific role, or really anything about my work. In the handful of conversations we had over the past year where she mentioned her fiancé Marcus, she had talked about his intelligence and kindness, mentioned he worked in data science but never his employer. 2 separate worlds, about to collide spectacularly at the wedding that was now only hours away. I had spent 3 months debating what to do with this information. The ethical considerations were complicated. Should I tell Marcus that his fiancée was my sister? Should I tell Vanessa that her fiancé worked for me? Should I tell my parents that the accomplished young man they had welcomed into the family was actually employed at the company run by their failure daughter? Every option felt fraught with potential disaster. If I revealed the connection before the wedding, I risked becoming the center of drama during what should be Vanessa's special time. If I said nothing and the truth emerged organically, I would appear to have been hiding something, which would be interpreted as shame or deception regardless of my actual motivations. I had consulted with my business partner and co-founder, Jennifer Ramirez, who had listened to the whole absurd situation over drinks at our favorite wine bar in Austin. Jennifer had known me since graduate school, had been there through the medical school departure, and understood my family dynamics better than anyone. "This is going to blow up however you handle it," she had said, swirling her Malbec thoughtfully. "The question is whether you want to control the detonation, or let it happen randomly." Personally, I think you should tell them now and watch their faces when they realize they've been condescending to someone more successful than they are. But I had not been able to bring myself to do it. Some part of me, the part that still remembered being a little girl desperate for my parents' approval, could not deliberately create conflict before my sister's wedding. So I had done nothing. I had sent an appropriate gift from the registry. I had responded to Vanessa's occasional wedding planning texts with encouraging emojis. I had kept my mouth shut and hoped that somehow the weekend would pass without incident. That hope had died approximately 45 minutes ago when I arrived at the bridal suite and overheard my mother talking to her sister, my Aunt Caroline, just outside the door. I am just so proud of Vanessa. She works so hard to get where she is, and Marcus is exactly the kind of man she deserves. Accomplished, ambitious, from a good family. Not like Becca's situation. I had frozen in the hallway, my hand raised to knock. Aunt Caroline's response was sympathetic. Becca is doing fine, Patricia. She seems happy in Austin. Happy doing what exactly? She dropped out of medical school to do some computer thing that she cannot even explain properly. She is 32 years old and has never brought anyone to a family event. She lives alone in Texas working at some startup that will probably fail like most of them do. Meanwhile, Vanessa is about to marry a man with a PhD from Stanford who works in advanced analytics. The contrast could not be more stark. I had stood there for a long moment, absorbing the familiar sting of their assessment. Then I had knocked, painted on a smile, and entered the room to fulfill my role as the disappointing older sister who showed up for family obligations but was never quite good enough to deserve genuine inclusion. Now, 3 hours before the ceremony, I watched Vanessa examine herself in the full-length mirror while bridesmaids clustered around her like a glossy magazine spread come to life. They were all accomplished young women, doctors and lawyers and one cardiovascular researcher, all moving in the professional circles my parents valued. I knew most of them from various stages of growing up in Charleston, though we had never been close. Becca, can you check if the photographer is ready? Vanessa asked without turning around. I think we are almost ready for the getting ready photos. It was a task that could have been given to anyone, but it got me out of the room, which was probably the point. I nodded and left, walking down the elegant hallway of the Rosewood estate toward the main building where the photographers were supposed to be setting up. I had been to this venue before years ago for someone else's wedding. Charleston was like that, circles within circles of people who all knew each other, who attended the same events and sent their children to the same schools and married within the same acceptable boundaries. I had once been firmly within those circles. Now I existed at the periphery, present but not really participating. As I walked, my phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. How is it going? Have you burned down the patriarchy yet? I smiled despite myself and typed back. Still standing. Ceremony in 3 hours. Preparing for impact. Remember, you are a literal tech executive. You employ 73 people. Your company just closed a contract with a Fortune 100. You have nothing to be ashamed of. I knew this logically. The facts of my professional life were objectively impressive. Meridian Analytics had been named one of Austin's fastest-growing companies 2 years running. I had been profiled in business journals. I served on advisory boards. I had built something real and valuable that provided livelihoods for dozens of families. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But standing in this venue wearing a bridesmaid dress in a shade of dusty rose that Vanessa had selected, about to watch my sister marry my employee while my parents radiated disappointment at my existence, the facts felt less substantial than the feelings. I found the photographer, confirmed they would be ready in 10 minutes, and started walking back toward the bridal suite. As I rounded the corner, I nearly collided with my father coming from the opposite direction. Rebecca. He steadied me with a hand on my shoulder, his surgeon's grip precise and impersonal. I was just coming to check on your sister. How is she doing? She looks beautiful. Very happy. Good. He studied me for a moment, and I could see him trying to decide whether to say something more. He settled on. You look nice. That color suits you. It was the most personal compliment he had given me in years. I felt pathetically grateful for it and immediately hated myself for that gratitude. Thank you, Dad. Your mother mentioned you might leave tomorrow rather than staying for the Sunday brunch. That is a shame. We so rarely see you. The passive aggression was masterful. They rarely saw me because every visit was an endurance test of subtle criticism and disappointed sighs. But pointing this out would make me the problem, the difficult daughter who could not let things go. I have a client meeting Monday morning that I need to prepare for, I said, which was technically true, though I could have delegated it if I had wanted to stay. Always working. Like your old man. He smiled, and for just a moment I saw warmth there, a flicker of connection. Then it faded. Though I suppose it is different when you are in private practice versus corporate employment. More security in an established position. And there it was. The diminishment. The assumption that whatever I did, it was less serious, less important, less real than proper professional careers like surgery or medicine or really anything that did not involve computers and incomprehensible startup culture. I could have corrected him. I could have explained that I was not a corporate employee but a founder and executive, that I had built my company from nothing, that I carried the risks and reaped the rewards of entrepreneurship. But I had learned years ago that corrections were interpreted as defensiveness, as proof that I was insecure about my choices. So I smiled and nodded and said nothing the way I always did. My father patted my shoulder again and continued toward the bridal suite. I stood in the hallway for a moment, collecting myself, reminding myself that I only had to get through this weekend, and then I could return to Austin where people valued what I had built and respected what I contributed. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Marcus in our company Slack channel, sent to the whole senior team. Getting married in a few hours. Thanks for covering my projects this week. See you all back in the office Tuesday. Bringing back wedding cake. Several team members had already responded with congratulations and cake emojis. I added my own message. Congratulations, Marcus. Wishing you and Vanessa a wonderful wedding and a very happy future together. It felt surreal to type my sister's name in a work chat. These two parts of my life had remained separate for so long that their convergence still did not feel quite real. I glanced at my watch. 2 hours and 45 minutes until the ceremony. After that, a cocktail hour, then dinner, then toasts. Marcus had mentioned in our last one-on-one meeting before he left for wedding preparations that his best man was planning something special for the reception toasts. Something that would highlight the journey that brought Marcus and Vanessa together. That was when it would happen. During the toasts, when people stood up to speak about the couple, to share stories and celebrate their union. Someone would mention Marcus's work. Someone would mention the company name. And then in front of 200 wedding guests, including all my extended family and my parents' entire social circle, the truth would emerge. I could still head it off. I could find Marcus before the ceremony, pull him aside, explain the situation. We could figure out together how to handle the revelation with minimal disruption to the wedding celebration. But I found myself not wanting to do that. I found myself wanting to see my parents' faces when they realized that the failure daughter had hired and now managed the accomplished young man they had embraced as the son-in-law they actually wanted. I wanted to watch the recalibration happen in real time as they understood that everything they believed about my life was based on assumptions they had never bothered to verify. Was that petty? Probably. Was it understandable? I thought so. I returned to the bridal suite where the photographer had arrived and was arranging people for pictures. Vanessa glowed in her wedding gown, radiant in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or styling, and everything to do with genuine happiness. Whatever my complicated feelings about my family, I did want Vanessa to be happy. She had chosen someone kind and brilliant, someone who would challenge her intellectually and support her professionally. Marcus was a good man. They would be good together. The fact that he worked for me was just an inconvenient detail that happened to undermine my entire family's narrative about my failed life. Becca, stand here. The photographer positioned me at the edge of the bridesmaids group. Always at the edge, never quite central, present but peripheral. The visual metaphor for my role in this family was almost too perfect. We smiled for the camera. Vanessa laughed at something one of the other bridesmaids said. My mother supervised everything with the focused intensity she brought to all important events. In a few hours, Vanessa would walk down the aisle toward Marcus, who would be waiting in his tuxedo, probably slightly nervous but mostly thrilled, ready to commit to building a life with my sister. And I would be sitting in the audience, knowing what everyone else was about to discover, holding a truth that would reshape every relationship in that room. The photographer moved us through various configurations. Sisters alone, sisters with mother, full bridal party. With each click of the camera, we moved closer to the moment when this carefully staged perfection would be disrupted by reality. I thought about the business I had built. The early days when Jennifer and I worked out of a shared workspace, taking meetings with potential clients who were skeptical that two women in their 20s could handle sophisticated analytical work. The first major contract we won that validated our approach and gave us capital to hire our first employees. The slow, difficult process of building credibility in a field that was often dismissive of anyone who did not fit a particular demographic profile. I thought about the 73 people who now depended on Meridian for their livelihoods. The projects we had completed that genuinely helped our clients make better decisions. The culture we had built that prioritized both excellence and humanity, that refused to accept the toxic norms that plagued too much of the tech industry. None of my family knew any of this. They knew I did something with computers. They knew I had not become a doctor. Everything else was a blank space they filled with assumptions. In approximately 2 hours, that blank space was about to be illuminated in the most dramatic way possible. And I was going to let it happen. Not because I wanted revenge exactly, but because I was tired. Tired of being small. Tired of accepting their narrative. Tired of pretending that my life was somehow less valuable because I had chosen a different path than the one they prescribed. Okay, I think we have everything we need for now, the photographer announced. The ceremony starts in 2 hours. I will see you all at the venue. The bridesmaids dispersed to make final preparations. Vanessa caught my arm as I turned to leave. Thank you for being here, Becca. I know it is not always easy with Mom and Dad, but it means a lot to me that you came. She looked so happy, so full of hope for her future. I felt a surge of protective affection for her. This little sister who had benefited from being the good daughter but who had never been intentionally cruel, who simply existed within a system that elevated her at my expense. I would not miss it, I said, and meant it. Whatever was about to happen, it needed to happen. The truth could not stay hidden forever. And maybe, just maybe, this dramatic revelation would finally force my family to see me as I actually was rather than as the disappointment they had decided I must be. I returned to my hotel room to change into my ceremony dress. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman who had built something remarkable against considerable odds. A woman who had walked away from a path that would have made her miserable to find one that brought genuine satisfaction. A woman who was about to stop hiding. In 2 hours, my sister would get married. Shortly after that, during the reception toasts, my two worlds would collide. And then we would all have to deal with the aftermath of years of assumptions meeting undeniable reality. I was ready. Or as ready as anyone could be for the moment when everything changed. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, time to catch the golden afternoon light that made the Rosewood Estate Gardens look like something from a Southern Living magazine spread. I arrived 30 minutes early, as was expected of the wedding party, and found my designated seat in the third row on the bride's side. My parents sat in the front row, of course, positioned like Charleston royalty presiding over their younger daughter's triumph. I watched guests arrive in waves of pastel dresses and seersucker suits, the uniform of a certain class of Southern wedding attendee. I recognized many faces from my childhood, friends of my parents who had known me when I was the promising Lawson daughter, the one who was going to follow in the family tradition of medical excellence. Some nodded politely as they passed. Others looked through me as if I had become partially invisible through the act of disappointing my parents. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwick, who had been my mother's closest friend since their residency days, paused at my row. "Rebecca, darling, how lovely to see you. Are you still in Texas?" The question was asked with the kind of bright concern usually reserved for discussing someone's unfortunate medical condition. Still in Texas, as if it were a temporary affliction I might recover from. Yes, still in Austin. I love it there. How nice. And what is it you do again? Your mother mentioned something about computers? This was the moment I could have corrected the record. I could have explained that I was the chief technology officer of a successful consulting firm. I could have mentioned our revenue, our client list, our growth trajectory. Instead, I heard myself say what I always said. I work in data analytics. How interesting. Her tone suggested it was anything but. Well, you must be so proud of Vanessa. A doctor and now marrying such an accomplished young man. Your parents are just thrilled." She moved on before I could respond, which was probably for the best. The exchange was typical of dozens I had experienced over the years, each one a small paper cut that individually meant little but cumulatively bled me of the energy to keep correcting people's assumptions. The string quartet began playing, signaling that the ceremony was about to start. The wedding party took their positions. I watched Marcus emerge from a side entrance with his best man, and for the first time since arriving in Charleston, I saw him in this context rather than as my employee. He looked nervous and excited, the way grooms are supposed to look, checking his pocket for the rings and scanning the gathering crowd with barely contained anticipation. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He smiled politely, the way you smile at your fiancé's family members you have met a few times at holidays and pre-wedding events. There was no recognition of our professional relationship because from his perspective, there was no professional relationship to recognize. I was just Vanessa's older sister, the quiet one who lived in Texas and did something vague with technology. The bridesmaids processed down the aisle in our dusty rose dresses, and then Vanessa appeared on my father's arm. She really did look beautiful, radiant with the kind of joy that made even cynical hearts soften. My father's expression was one of pure pride and satisfaction. This was the daughter who had fulfilled every expectation, who had made all his sacrifices worthwhile, who proved that his approach to parenting had been correct. The ceremony itself was traditional and lovely. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, and the journey two people take when they decide to build a life together. Marcus and Vanessa exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising support and partnership and adventure. When the officiant pronounced them married and they kissed, the garden erupted in applause and joy. I clapped along with everyone else, genuinely happy for them while simultaneously aware that in approximately 90 minutes, during the reception toasts, this happiness was going to be complicated by revelation and reckoning. The cocktail hour was held on the estate's expansive veranda overlooking the gardens. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budgets. I accepted a glass of champagne and positioned myself near one of the tall tables on the periphery, my usual strategy for family events. My mother found me there, champagne in hand, flushed with the success of the ceremony. That was just perfect, was it not? Vanessa looked absolutely stunning. She did. It was a beautiful ceremony. Marcus seemed so happy. His parents are delightful people. His father is an engineer, very successful apparently. His mother was a professor before she retired. Good family. The emphasis on good family was subtle but clear. Marcus came from a family of accomplished professionals, people who had raised their son properly, who had guided him toward success, rather than allowing him to throw away opportunities for frivolous pursuits. They seem very nice, I agreed neutrally. You know, Rebecca, seeing Vanessa today, I have been thinking about when you were her age. You had so much potential. It is such a shame that you did not finish medical school. You would probably be married by now too, settled, established. Instead, she trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Instead, I was 32 and single and working in tech, a constellation of failures in her assessment. I took a long sip of champagne and said nothing because what was there to say that I had not already said 100 times before? My mother had never understood my decision to leave medical school, had never asked about what I was building in Austin, had never expressed curiosity about whether I might be happy with my choices. Well, it is what it is, she continued, patting my arm with the kind of consoling sympathy usually reserved for the terminally ill. At least you are here for your sister's special day. That is what matters. She drifted away to greet other guests, leaving me alone with my champagne and my complicated feelings. I looked out over the gardens where Vanessa and Marcus were posing for photographs, their happiness genuine and uncomplicated. Soon, very soon, that happiness was going to be interrupted by the collision of truth and assumption. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Jennifer. Survived the ceremony? I typed back. Ceremony was fine. Waiting for the explosion. You could still tell them before the toasts. Control the narrative. Too late for that. We're committed to chaos now. Jennifer sent back a gif of someone eating popcorn, which made me smile despite everything. She understood the absurdity of this situation, the tragicomic element of having built something significant, while my family remained convinced I had accomplished nothing. The cocktail hour stretched on. I made small talk with distant cousins and family friends, each conversation reinforcing the narrative that had solidified around me. Poor Rebecca, who had such promise but threw it away. Rebecca, who could have been a doctor but chose to work with computers instead. Rebecca, who at 32 was still single and childless, obviously because she had made poor life choices that left her undesirable to the kind of men Vanessa attracted. No one asked about my actual life. No one inquired about my work with genuine curiosity. No one wondered whether I might be happy or fulfilled or proud of what I had built. They had decided who I was, and no information to the contrary was welcome because it would disrupt their comfortable narrative. At 6 o'clock, the guests were invited into the ballroom for dinner. The space had been transformed into something magical, with elaborate floral centerpieces and lighting that cast everything in a romantic glow. I found my assigned seat at a table with other bridesmaids and their partners, positioned far from the head table where Vanessa and Marcus sat with their parents and wedding party leadership. Dinner was a multi-course affair accompanied by toasts from various family members and friends. My father stood first, giving a speech about watching his little girl grow up, about his pride in the woman she had become, about welcoming Marcus into the family. He spoke eloquently about the importance of choosing a partner who shared your values and ambitions, who understood the demands of professional success, who came from a family that valued education and achievement. Every word felt like an indirect rebuke of my own choices and my own single status. I smiled and clapped at the appropriate moments while feeling the familiar ache of being the daughter who was referenced only in contrast to the one who had succeeded. Marcus's father spoke next, welcoming Vanessa into their family and expressing admiration for her dedication to her medical career. He talked about the importance of partnership between equals, of two ambitious people supporting each other's dreams. It was a lovely sentiment that would become more complicated when everyone learned that Marcus's professional dreams were currently being supported by his new sister-in-law's leadership and company infrastructure. Then came the best man, Daniel Nguyen, who Marcus had introduced to everyone as his closest friend from graduate school. Daniel was funny and warm, telling stories about Marcus's legendary focus during their PhD program, his ability to explain complex statistical concepts in ways that made sense to mere mortals, his terrible taste in karaoke songs. When Marcus told me he was moving to Austin for work, I knew it must be an incredible opportunity, Daniel said, grinning at the head table. Marcus does not make changes lightly. He researches everything to death, weighs every option, drives everyone crazy with his pros and cons lists. The audience laughed. Marcus shook his head good-naturedly. But he said he had found the perfect position at a company doing exactly the kind of work he wanted to do, with leadership he respected and a culture that aligned with his values. And then he met Vanessa, and suddenly Austin was not just the right professional move but the right life move. Daniel raised his glass. So I want to toast not just Marcus and Vanessa, but also the circumstances that brought them together. To Meridian Analytics, the company that brought Marcus to Austin, and gave him the opportunity to meet the love of his life. And to Marcus's boss Rebecca Chen. Wait, no, that is not right. He squinted at his notes and I felt my stomach drop. This was happening. Right now. The detonation I had been anticipating was beginning. Sorry, Daniel continued, looking flustered. I wrote this down wrong. Rebecca Lawson, the CTO at Meridian Analytics. Marcus always talks about how much he respects her leadership and vision. So thank you, Rebecca, wherever you are, for creating a company worth moving across the country for. The ballroom had gone very quiet. I could feel eyes turning toward me, confusion spreading like ripples in a pond. Daniel, still oblivious, was looking around the room as if expecting this Rebecca person to stand up and accept acknowledgement. My mother's voice cut through the silence. I am sorry, did you say Rebecca Lawson? Daniel nodded, still smiling. Yes, she is the CTO at Meridian. Marcus reports directly to her. He has been raving about her since he started there. Brilliant leader, apparently. Really understands how to build and scale a data science practice. Every head in the ballroom turned toward me. My father's face had gone pale. My mother looked like she had been slapped. Vanessa's expression was pure confusion, her eyes darting between me and Marcus as if trying to solve an equation that did not make sense. Marcus himself had frozen, his champagne glass halfway to his lips, his face a portrait of dawning horror as he realized what had just been revealed and how it had been revealed. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on me, could practically hear the mental recalibrations happening as everyone processed what they had just learned. I stood up slowly, my legs steadier than I felt, and raised my own champagne glass. If this was happening, if the truth was coming out in this spectacular fashion, I might as well lean into it. "Thank you, Daniel, for those kind words," I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "And congratulations to Marcus and Vanessa. I am so happy that Marcus's move to Austin worked out well both professionally and personally." The silence that followed my words was deafening. No one seemed to know how to respond. The revelation hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, visible evidence of something that had just dramatically changed the landscape. My father found his voice first. "Rebecca, what is he talking about? You are Marcus's boss?" The way he said it made it sound like an accusation rather than a question. As if I had somehow committed fraud by failing to mention that the man my sister was marrying happened to work at the company I had founded. "Yes," I said simply. "Marcus is a senior data scientist at Meridian Analytics. I co-founded the company 6 years ago. He has been with us for the past 14 months. "Okay, I think we have everything we need for now," the photographer announced. "The ceremony starts in 2 hours. I will see you all at the venue." The bridesmaids dispersed to make final preparations. Vanessa caught my arm as I turned to leave. "Thank you for being here, Becca. I know it is not always easy with Mom and Dad, but it means a lot to me that you came." She looked so happy, so full of hope for her future. I felt a surge of protective affection for her. This little sister who had benefited from being the good daughter but who had never been intentionally cruel, who simply existed within a system that elevated her at my expense. "I would not miss it," I said, and meant it. Whatever was about to happen, it needed to happen. The truth could not stay hidden forever. And maybe, just maybe, this dramatic revelation would finally force my family to see me as I actually was rather than as the disappointment they had decided I must be. I returned to my hotel room to change into my ceremony dress. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman who had built something remarkable against considerable odds. A woman who had walked away from a path that would have made her miserable to find one that brought genuine satisfaction. A woman who was about to stop hiding. In 2 hours, my sister would get married. Shortly after that, during the reception toasts, my two worlds would collide. And then we would all have to deal with the aftermath of years of assumptions meeting undeniable reality. I was ready, or as ready as anyone could be for the moment when everything changed. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, time to catch the golden afternoon light that made the Rosewood Estate Gardens look like something from a Southern Living magazine spread. I arrived 30 minutes early, as was expected of the wedding party, and found my designated seat in the third row on the bride's side. My parents sat in the front row, of course, positioned like Charleston royalty presiding over their younger daughter's triumph. I watched guests arrive in waves of pastel dresses and seersucker suits, the uniform of a certain class of Southern wedding attendee. I recognized many faces from my childhood, friends of my parents who had known me when I was the promising Lawson daughter, the one who was going to follow in the family tradition of medical excellence. Some nodded politely as they passed. Others looked through me as if I had become partially invisible through the act of disappointing my parents. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwick, who had been my mother's closest friend since their residency days, paused at my row. "Rebecca, darling, how lovely to see you. Are you still in Texas?" The question was asked with the kind of bright concern usually reserved for discussing someone's unfortunate medical condition. Still in Texas, as if it were a temporary affliction I might recover from. "Yes, still in Austin. I love it there." "How nice. And what is it you do again? Your mother mentioned something about computers?" This was the moment I could have corrected the record. I could have explained that I was the chief technology officer of a successful consulting firm. I could have mentioned our revenue, our client list, our growth trajectory. Instead, I heard myself say what I always said. "I work in data analytics." "How interesting." Her tone suggested it was anything but. "Well, you must be so proud of Vanessa. A doctor and now marrying such an accomplished young man. Your parents are just thrilled." She moved on before I could respond, which was probably for the best. The exchange was typical of dozens I had experienced over the years, each one a small paper cut that individually meant little but cumulatively bled me of the energy to keep correcting people's assumptions. The string quartet began playing, signaling that the ceremony was about to start. The wedding party took their positions. I watched Marcus emerge from a side entrance with his best man, and for the first time since arriving in Charleston, I saw him in this context rather than as my employee. He looked nervous and excited, the way grooms are supposed to look, checking his pocket for the rings and scanning the gathering crowd with barely contained anticipation. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He smiled politely, the way you smile at your fiancé's family members you have met a few times at holidays and pre-wedding events. There was no recognition of our professional relationship because from his perspective, there was no professional relationship to recognize. I was just Vanessa's older sister, the quiet one who lived in Texas and did something vague with technology. The bridesmaids processed down the aisle in our dusty rose dresses, and then Vanessa appeared on my father's arm. She really did look beautiful, radiant with the kind of joy that made even cynical hearts soften. My father's expression was one of pure pride and satisfaction. This was the daughter who had fulfilled every expectation, who had made all his sacrifices worthwhile, who proved that his approach to parenting had been correct. The ceremony itself was traditional and lovely. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, and the journey two people take when they decide to build a life together. Marcus and Vanessa exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising support and partnership and adventure. When the officiant pronounced them married and they kissed, the garden erupted in applause and joy. I clapped along with everyone else, genuinely happy for them while simultaneously aware that in approximately 90 minutes, during the reception toasts, this happiness was going to be complicated by revelation and reckoning. The cocktail hour was held on the estate's expansive veranda overlooking the gardens. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budgets. I accepted a glass of champagne and positioned myself near one of the tall tables on the periphery, my usual strategy for family events. My mother found me there, champagne in hand, flushed with the success of the ceremony. That was just perfect, was it not? Vanessa looked absolutely stunning. She did. It was a beautiful ceremony. Marcus seemed so happy. His parents are delightful people. His father is an engineer, very successful apparently. His mother was a professor before she retired. Good family. The emphasis on good family was subtle but clear. Marcus came from a family of accomplished professionals, people who had raised their son properly, who had guided him toward success, rather than allowing him to throw away opportunities for frivolous pursuits. They seem very nice, I agreed neutrally. You know, Rebecca, seeing Vanessa today, I have been thinking about when you were her age. You had so much potential. It is such a shame that you did not finish medical school. You would probably be married by now too, settled, established. Instead, she trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Instead, I was 32 and single and working in tech, a constellation of failures in her assessment. I took a long sip of champagne and said nothing because what was there to say that I had not already said 100 times before? My mother had never understood my decision to leave medical school, had never asked about what I was building in Austin, had never expressed curiosity about whether I might be happy with my choices. Well, it is what it is, she continued, patting my arm with the kind of consoling sympathy usually reserved for the terminally ill. At least you are here for your sister's special day. That is what matters. She drifted away to greet other guests, leaving me alone with my champagne and my complicated feelings. I looked out over the gardens where Vanessa and Marcus were posing for photographs, their happiness genuine and uncomplicated. Soon, very soon, that happiness was going to be interrupted by the collision of truth and assumption. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from Jennifer. Survived the ceremony? I typed back. Ceremony was fine. Waiting for the explosion. You could still tell them before the toasts. Control the narrative. Too late for that. We're committed to chaos now. Jennifer sent back a gif of someone eating popcorn, which made me smile despite everything. She understood the absurdity of this situation, the tragicomic element of having built something significant, while my family remained convinced I had accomplished nothing. The cocktail hour stretched on. I made small talk with distant cousins and family friends, each conversation reinforcing the narrative that had solidified around me. Poor Rebecca, who had such promise but threw it away. Rebecca, who could have been a doctor but chose to work with computers instead. Rebecca, who at 32 was still single and childless, obviously because she had made poor life choices that left her undesirable to the kind of men Vanessa attracted. No one asked about my actual life. No one inquired about my work with genuine curiosity. No one wondered whether I might be happy or fulfilled or proud of what I had built. They had decided who I was, and no information to the contrary was welcome because it would disrupt their comfortable narrative. At 6 o'clock, the guests were invited into the ballroom for dinner. The space had been transformed into something magical, with elaborate floral centerpieces and lighting that cast everything in a romantic glow. I found my assigned seat at a table with other bridesmaids and their partners, positioned far from the head table where Vanessa and Marcus sat with their parents and wedding party leadership. Dinner was a multi-course affair accompanied by toasts from various family members and friends. My father stood first, giving a speech about watching his little girl grow up, about his pride in the woman she had become, about welcoming Marcus into the family. He spoke eloquently about the importance of choosing a partner who shared your values and ambitions, who understood the demands of professional success, who came from a family that valued education and achievement. Every word felt like an indirect rebuke of my own choices and my own single status. I smiled and clapped at the appropriate moments while feeling the familiar ache of being the daughter who was referenced only in contrast to the one who had succeeded. Marcus's father spoke next, welcoming Vanessa into their family and expressing admiration for her dedication to her medical career. He talked about the importance of partnership between equals, of two ambitious people supporting each other's dreams. It was a lovely sentiment that would become more complicated when everyone learned that Marcus's professional dreams were currently being supported by his new sister-in-law's leadership and company infrastructure. Then came the best man, Daniel Nguyen, who Marcus had introduced to everyone as his closest friend from graduate school. Daniel was funny and warm, telling stories about Marcus's legendary focus during their PhD program, his ability to explain complex statistical concepts in ways that made sense to mere mortals, his terrible taste in karaoke songs. When Marcus told me he was moving to Austin for work, I knew it must be an incredible opportunity, Daniel said, grinning at the head table. Marcus does not make changes lightly. He researches everything to death, weighs every option, drives everyone crazy with his pros and cons lists. The audience laughed. Marcus shook his head good-naturedly. But he said he had found the perfect position at a company doing exactly the kind of work he wanted to do, with leadership he respected and a culture that aligned with his values. And then he met Vanessa, and suddenly Austin was not just the right professional move but the right life move. Daniel raised his glass. So I want to toast not just Marcus and Vanessa, but also the circumstances that brought them together. To Meridian Analytics, the company that brought Marcus to Austin, and gave him the opportunity to meet the love of his life. And to Marcus's boss Rebecca Chen. Wait, no, that is not right. He squinted at his notes and I felt my stomach drop. This was happening. Right now. The detonation I had been anticipating was beginning. Sorry, Daniel continued, looking flustered. I wrote this down wrong. Rebecca Lawson, the CTO at Meridian Analytics. Marcus always talks about how much he respects her leadership and vision. So thank you, Rebecca, wherever you are, for creating a company worth moving across the country for. The ballroom had gone very quiet. I could feel eyes turning toward me, confusion spreading like ripples in a pond. Daniel, still oblivious, was looking around the room as if expecting this Rebecca person to stand up and accept acknowledgement. My mother's voice cut through the silence. I am sorry, did you say Rebecca Lawson? Daniel nodded, still smiling. Yes, she is the CTO at Meridian. Marcus reports directly to her. He has been raving about her since he started there. Brilliant leader, apparently. Really understands how to build and scale a data science practice. Every head in the ballroom turned toward me. My father's face had gone pale. My mother looked like she had been slapped. Vanessa's expression was pure confusion, her eyes darting between me and Marcus as if trying to solve an equation that did not make sense. Marcus himself had frozen, his champagne glass halfway to his lips, his face a portrait of dawning horror as he realized what had just been revealed and how it had been revealed. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating. I could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes on me, could practically hear the mental recalibrations happening as everyone processed what they had just learned. I stood up slowly, my legs steadier than I felt, and raised my own champagne glass. If this was happening, if the truth was coming out in this spectacular fashion, I might as well lean into it. "Thank you, Daniel, for those kind words," I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "And congratulations to Marcus and Vanessa. I am so happy that Marcus's move to Austin worked out well both professionally and personally." The silence that followed my words was deafening. No one seemed to know how to respond. The revelation hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, visible evidence of something that had just dramatically changed the landscape. My father found his voice first. "Rebecca, what is he talking about? You are Marcus's boss?" The way he said it made it sound like an accusation rather than a question. As if I had somehow committed fraud by failing to mention that the man my sister was marrying happened to work at the company I had founded. "Yes," I said simply. "Marcus is a senior data scientist at Meridian Analytics. I co-founded the company 6 years ago. He has been with us for the past 14 months. Vanessa stood up from the head table, her face flushed. "Becca, you own the company Marcus works for? Why did you not tell me?" "I tried to keep my professional life separate from family gatherings," I said carefully. "You never asked about my company or what I did specifically. I did not realize you were dating Marcus until a few months ago, and by then it seemed awkward to bring it up before the wedding." This was not entirely true, but it was true enough. The full truth that I had deliberately withheld the information because I wanted to see their faces when they realized they had been wrong about me, would not have been well received. Marcus had stood up as well, looking between me and Vanessa with an expression of absolute mortification. "Vanessa, I had no idea. You said your sister worked in tech in Austin, but you never mentioned the company name or her role. I did not make the connection." My mother had her hand pressed to her chest as if she were having a cardiac event. "Rebecca, you are telling us that you run a company? A real company?" The fact that she felt the need to specify a real company spoke volumes about what she had assumed I was doing all these years. Some little startup that was more hobby than business, something that would inevitably fail and prove that I should have stayed in medical school where I belonged. "Yes, Mother. A real company. Meridian Analytics. We employ 73 people. We work with Fortune 500 clients on complex data science projects. Last year our revenue exceeded $22 million. I watched the numbers land, watched the mental calculations happening in real time. $22 million was not insignificant. That was not a failed startup or a questionable venture. That was a successful business by any reasonable measure. My father had his lawyer face on, the expression he used when he was processing information he did not want to accept. "And Marcus works for you? You are his supervisor?" "I am the CTO. Marcus reports to me through our organizational structure, yes. I was the final interviewer for his position. I approved his hiring." The implications were settling over the room like ash after a volcanic eruption. The failure daughter had hired the accomplished son-in-law. The disappointment who worked with computers in some vague capacity was actually running a multi-million-dollar company and employing people with PhDs from Stanford. Vanessa sank back into her chair, looking stunned. "All this time, when you said you worked in data analytics, you meant you owned a data analytics company?" "Co-founded and co-own, yes. Jennifer Ramirez and I started Meridian 6 years ago. She handles the business operations side. I handle the technical leadership and client relationships." One of my mother's friends, Dr. Susan Park, who was sitting 2 tables away, called out, "Patricia, did you know about this?" My mother shook her head mutely, still processing. The fact that she had not known, that she had spent years pitying her failure daughter who was actually more financially successful than she was, hung in the air like an indictment. The wedding planner appeared at my elbow, her face professionally neutral but her eyes revealing that she understood a social catastrophe was unfolding. "Perhaps we should let the happy couple cut the cake," she suggested brightly, trying to redirect the evening back to its intended script. But the script had been shredded. There was no going back to the comfortable narrative where Vanessa was the success and I was the disappointment. The truth was out, explosive and undeniable, and everyone in this ballroom was going to have to reckon with how wrong they had been. Marcus had moved to Vanessa's side, speaking to her in low, urgent tones. I could not hear what he was saying, but I could see her shaking her head, see the confusion and hurt on her face. She had not known. She had married someone who worked for her older sister without realizing it. And now her wedding reception had turned into a referendum on family dynamics and failed assumptions. I remained standing, champagne glass still in hand, feeling strangely calm despite the chaos I had allowed to unfold. Part of me felt guilty for not preventing this, for letting Daniel's toast reveal the truth in such a dramatic fashion. But another part of me, the part that had swallowed years of condescension and dismissal, felt something very close to satisfaction. They had all been so certain they knew who I was. The dropout, the failure, the daughter who threw away her future for something they could not understand and did not value. They had constructed an entire narrative around my inadequacy, and they had never bothered to check whether that narrative was accurate. Now they knew, and they were going to have to live with the knowledge that they had been wrong. My father approached me, his expression carefully controlled. "Rebecca, we need to talk about this privately." "There is nothing to talk about privately, Dad. The facts are the facts. I have a successful company. Marcus works there. That is the situation. You should have told us. You should have told Vanessa before the wedding." "Why? Would it have changed anything? Would you suddenly have been proud of me if you had known I was financially successful? Or would you have found other reasons to be disappointed that I did not become a doctor?" The question hung between us, uncomfortable and accusatory. Around us, I could hear the murmur of guests processing the revelation, could feel the social fabric of the evening struggling to reweave itself around this new information. My father's jaw tightened. "This is not the time or place for this conversation. This is your sister's wedding day. You have made it about you and your grievances." "I did not make it about anything." Daniel gave a toast thanking Marcus's boss for creating a company worth moving for. "I simply confirmed the facts. If that disrupts the narrative you all preferred, that is not my fault." Vanessa appeared beside my father, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Becca, why would you hide this? I do not understand. You let us all think you were just doing some random tech job when you were actually running a major company." "I did not hide it, Vanessa. I just did not correct your assumptions. You never asked. None of you ever asked about my work or my life or what I had built. You decided I was a failure and you never looked beyond that narrative." "That is not fair," she said, but her voice lacked conviction because somewhere she knew it was exactly fair. The wedding planner was hovering anxiously, clearly desperate to salvage the evening. The band was setting up, ready to transition into dancing. Servers were preparing to bring out the cake. All the normal wedding reception activities were poised to happen if only everyone could move past this uncomfortable moment of truth. But moving past it meant accepting that everything they had believed about me was wrong. It meant acknowledging that they had been dismissive and condescending toward someone who had actually accomplished remarkable things. It meant admitting that their measurement of success had been so narrow that it blinded them to different forms of achievement. I saw my mother crying quietly, my Aunt Caroline comforting her. I saw Marcus looking absolutely miserable, caught between his new wife and his boss in a situation no one could have anticipated. I saw the other bridesmaids whispering among themselves, their expressions ranging from shock to something that might have been admiration. And I saw my father, struggling to reconcile the daughter he thought he knew with the reality that had just been revealed. The disappointment with the chief technology officer. The failure with the successful entrepreneur. The woman he had pitted with the woman who employed 73 people and generated $22 million in annual revenue. The reckoning I had anticipated was happening in real time, and it was messier and more painful than I had imagined. This was not the triumphant vindication I might have fantasized about. This was just sad and awkward and uncomfortable for everyone involved. But it was also necessary. The truth was out now, undeniable and public. Whatever happened next, at least it would be based on reality rather than assumptions. At least I would no longer have to pretend to be smaller than I was just to make my family comfortable with their narrative about my failure. I set down my champagne glass and looked at Vanessa, who was still standing there with tears in her eyes on what should have been the happiest day of her life. "I am sorry this came out the way it did," I said quietly. "I really am. You deserve to have a beautiful wedding day without family drama. But I am not sorry that it came out. I am tired of being the family disappointment when I have actually built something I am proud of. Then I walked away from the head table, through the murmuring crowd, out of the ballroom and into the cool evening air of the Charleston garden. Behind me, I could hear the wedding planner's voice rising with forced cheer, trying to redirect everyone's attention to cake cutting and dancing. But the damage was done. The truth was out, and everything had changed. I stood in the gardens for several minutes, breathing in the cool evening air and trying to steady the adrenaline that was coursing through my system. The string lights overhead cast a soft glow over the manicured pathways, creating a romantic atmosphere that felt entirely at odds with the social explosion I had just walked away from. Through the tall windows of the ballroom, I could see the wedding guests milling about, some dancing now as the band played, others clustered in small groups undoubtedly discussing what had just transpired. My phone buzzed insistently in my clutch. I pulled it out to find a series of messages from Jennifer, each one more urgent than the last. What happened? I'm getting LinkedIn notifications that people are looking at your profile. Someone just requested to connect with me saying they met me at your sister's wedding. What is going on? Becca, call me. I typed back quickly. The secret is out. It happened during the toasts. We'll call you later. Currently hiding in the garden. Her response was immediate. You okay? I considered the question. Was I okay? I felt shaken and guilty and vindicated and sad all at the same time. A complicated cocktail of emotions that I did not have the energy to parse at the moment. I will be, I typed back. Just need a minute. I was putting my phone away when I heard footsteps on the gravel path behind me. I turned to find Marcus approaching. His bow tie loosened and his expression agonized. Rebecca, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Daniel must have written down his toast notes wrong, or maybe I mentioned you and he thought. I do not know what happened, but I never intended for it to come out like that. He looked genuinely distressed, and I felt a pang of sympathy for him. This was his wedding day, and it had just been derailed by a revelation that was not his fault. It is not your fault, Marcus. You did not know Vanessa was my sister. She did not know you worked for me. This was just an unfortunate collision of circumstances that was bound to happen eventually. He ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, disrupting it completely. But at her wedding reception, in front of everyone, Vanessa is devastated. She thinks you deliberately hid this to embarrass her or to make some kind of statement. That stung more than I expected. I did not hide it to embarrass her. I did not know how to tell her. And the longer I waited, the more awkward it became. Why did you not tell me? When I interviewed with you, when I was doing my reference checks at any point in the past 14 months, you could have mentioned that you had a sister in Charleston who was a dermatologist named Vanessa. I would have made the connection immediately. He was right, of course. There had been multiple opportunities to reveal the connection, and I had chosen not to take them. But explaining why felt like exposing wounds I was not ready to show to my employee, however kind he might be. My relationship with my family is complicated, I said carefully. They did not know about my company or my role there. They thought I was just doing some vague tech job that was not particularly impressive or important. I kept those worlds separate because it was easier than constantly correcting their assumptions. Marcus stared at me. They did not know you founded Meridian? How is that possible? You are the CTO of a company with over 70 employees and 20+ million in revenue. How did they not know? Because they never asked. They decided 8 years ago that I was a failure for leaving medical school, and they never updated that narrative based on any actual information about my life. He was quiet for a moment processing this. Then he said quietly, "That is really sad, Rebecca. I am sorry your family treated you that way." The sympathy in his voice made my throat tight. I had spent so long armoring myself against my family's dismissal that genuine compassion from someone who understood what I had built felt almost unbearable. I should not have let it come out this way, I said. I should have told you months ago when I realized the connection. I should have told Vanessa before the wedding. I did not know how to do it without it becoming a whole thing. And then it became a whole thing anyway in the worst possible way. Vanessa wants to talk to you, Marcus said. She is pretty upset right now, but I think she needs to hear your side of this directly. I nodded, even though the last thing I wanted was to go back into that ballroom and face my sister's hurt and my parents' shock, and the speculative stares of 200 wedding guests who were probably dissecting every element of my life and my choices. We walked back toward the venue together. As we approached the entrance, Marcus touched my arm gently. For what it is worth, you are an excellent boss. Working at Meridian has been one of the best professional decisions I have ever made. The culture you and Jennifer have built, the quality of the work we do, the way you develop your people. It is all really remarkable. Your family should be proud of what you have accomplished. Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot. He went back into the ballroom while I took a moment to compose myself. Through the windows, I could see Vanessa standing near the head table, still in her wedding gown, talking animatedly with our mother. Even from a distance, I could read the distress in her body language. I pushed open the door and stepped back into the reception. The music was still playing and some guests were dancing, but I could feel the shift in atmosphere. The easy celebratory mood had been replaced by something more complicated. An undercurrent of gossip and speculation that hummed beneath the surface gaiety. Several people looked up as I entered, and I felt their gazes tracking me as I made my way toward where Vanessa stood. Aunt Caroline saw me coming and quietly excused herself, leaving Vanessa alone with our mother. "Vanessa," I said quietly, "can we talk?" She turned to face me, and I could see she had been crying. Her carefully applied makeup was smudged, and her eyes were red-rimmed. The sight of her distress on what should have been her happiest day made guilt twist in my stomach. "How could you do this, Becca? How could you hide something this big and let it come out during my wedding reception?" "I did not plan for it to come out during your reception. I did not know Daniel was going to mention me in his toast. I was just as surprised as everyone else." "But you knew," she said, her voice rising. "You have known for months that I was marrying someone who works for you, and you said nothing. You let me plan this entire wedding, let me introduce Marcus to the family, let everyone meet him and form opinions, all while knowing this huge secret that made everything feel different." My mother stepped forward, her expression harder than I had ever seen it. "How long have you been lying to us, Rebecca? How long have you let us believe you were working some insignificant job when you were actually running a company?" "I did not lie to anyone," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I told you I worked in data analytics. I told you I had my own company. You never asked for details. You never expressed interest in what I was actually doing. You decided I was a failure for leaving medical school, and you never looked beyond that assumption." "That is not true," my mother said sharply. "We asked about your work. We asked how things were going. You asked in the most perfunctory way possible, and whenever I tried to explain what we were building at Meridian, your eyes glazed over. You changed the subject. You made it clear that you were not interested in the details of my work because it was not medicine and therefore not worthy of real attention. That is a gross mischaracterization of our interactions," my father said, appearing at my mother's elbow. His face was flushed, and I could see the tightness in his jaw that meant he was struggling to control his anger. "We have always been supportive of your choices, even when we disagreed with them." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost doubted my own memory. But then I remembered the years of subtle digs, the comparisons to Vanessa's accomplishments, the tone of pity whenever they discussed my life with their friends. Supportive was not the word I would have used to describe their approach to my career. "You have never been supportive of my leaving medical school," I said quietly. "You have spent 8 years making it clear that you see that decision as the defining failure of my life. You introduce me to your friends as your other daughter, the one in Texas, with this tone that suggests I am an embarrassment you are trying to minimize." "You are being dramatic," my mother said. "We have never been anything but loving toward you. Loving and supportive are not the same thing. You love me because I am your daughter. But you have never supported my actual choices or expressed pride in what I have accomplished outside of the path you wanted me to follow." Vanessa was watching this exchange with an expression I could not quite read. When she spoke, her voice was quieter but still hurt. "This is not about Mom and Dad right now. This is about you hiding the fact that my husband works for you. Do you understand how humiliating it is to find out in front of 200 people that my sister, who I thought was just doing okay in some tech job, is actually Marcus's boss? Everyone is going to think I did not even know basic facts about my own family. I am sorry, I said, and I meant it. I truly am sorry that it came out this way. But Vanessa, you never asked about my company. In all the times you talked about Marcus over the past year, you never mentioned where he worked. You never asked me where my company was located or what size it was or whether I might know people in the Austin data science community. The connection was not obvious, and by the time I realized who Marcus was, I did not know how to bring it up without creating exactly the kind of scene that happened tonight. You should have found a way, she said. You should have told me privately months ago. Instead, you let me go through my entire wedding day not knowing this huge fact. And now my reception is ruined because everyone is talking about this instead of celebrating my marriage. She was right that I should have told her sooner. But I also knew that telling her would have meant revealing to my entire family that I had built something significant, that I was not the failure they had decided I was, and part of me had not been ready for that confrontation. You are right, I said. I should have told you as soon as I realized the connection. I made a mistake in waiting, and I am genuinely sorry that my mistake affected your wedding day. My father was looking at me with an expression I had never seen before, something between reassessment and discomfort. 22 million in revenue, he said slowly. That is what you told everyone. Is that accurate? Last fiscal year, yes. We are on track to exceed 28 million this year. He exchanged a glance with my mother. I could practically see the recalculations happening, the adjustment of their entire understanding of my life and my choices. In their world, money was not the primary measure of success. Professional prestige and academic credentials mattered more, but $28 million was too significant to dismiss as irrelevant. And you own this company? My mother asked. You are not just an employee? I co-founded it with Jennifer Ramirez 6 years ago. We each own 45%. Our venture capital investors own the remaining 10% that we brought in during our series of funding round 2 years ago. The business terminology was clearly foreign to them, but the ownership stake was clear enough. I was not an employee subject to the whims of a corporate structure. I was a founder who had built something from nothing and maintained control of it. Why did you never tell us any of this? My mother asked, and for the first time I heard something other than accusation in her voice. She sounded genuinely bewildered, as if she could not comprehend why I would hide such significant accomplishments. Because you never gave me any indication that you cared, I said. Every time I came home for holidays or family events, you talked about Vanessa's achievements in medical school and her residency. You asked me how things were going in the same tone you would use to ask someone about a hobby they had that you found mildly concerning. You made it clear that my choice to leave Hopkins was a source of ongoing disappointment. Why would I share details about my success with people who had already decided I was a failure? We never said you were a failure, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. You did not have to say it explicitly. It was in every interaction. It was in the way you introduced me to your friends. It was in the way you changed the subject whenever I tried to talk about my work. It was in the relief in your voices whenever you talked about Vanessa's accomplishments, as if at least one daughter had turned out right. The ballroom had gotten quieter around us. Other guests had noticed the intense family conversation happening near the head table, and people were trying not to obviously stare while also not wanting to miss anything. The band had stopped playing, and the wedding planner looked like she wanted to intervene but did not know how. Vanessa sank into a chair, her wedding dress pooling around her. I cannot believe this is happening at my wedding. This was supposed to be the best day of my life, and instead it has turned into some kind of family therapy session about Becca's grievances. They are not grievances, I said quietly. They are facts about how I have been treated and how I have responded to that treatment. I am sorry that the truth came out today. I really am. But I am not going to apologize for the truth itself. Marcus had reappeared and was standing beside Vanessa, his hand on her shoulder. He looked miserable, caught in the middle of a family dynamic he was only beginning to understand. Mrs. Hartwick approached our group, her expression a studied blend of concern and curiosity. Patricia, Richard. I hope everything is all right. If there is anything we can do to help. My mother pulled herself together with visible effort, her social training overriding her emotional turmoil. Everything is fine, Eleanor. Just some family matters being discussed. Nothing that should concern the guests. But Eleanor was not going to be put off that easily. She turned to me with bright, calculating eyes. Rebecca, I had no idea you were running such a successful company. 22 million in revenue, did I hear correctly? That is quite impressive. You must tell me all about it. The shift in her tone from earlier was remarkable. When she thought I was doing some vague tech job, she could barely muster polite interest. Now that she understood I was financially successful, suddenly my work was impressive and worth discussing. It is not really the time for business discussions, I said diplomatically. This is Vanessa and Marcus's celebration. Of course. But perhaps we could have lunch when you are in town next. I am on the board of several organizations that could use sophisticated data analytics. It would be wonderful to hear more about what your company offers. She drifted away, and I saw similar calculations happening on the faces of other guests who had overheard. The failure daughter had been recast as a successful entrepreneur, and people were adjusting their treatment of me accordingly. It would have been satisfying if it were not so transparently mercenary. Vanessa stood up abruptly. I need some air. This is too much. She walked toward the garden entrance, and after a moment's hesitation, I followed her. My parents called after us, but I ignored them. Whatever needed to be said between Vanessa and me, it needed to happen without their interference. I found her standing by the same fountain where I had stood earlier, her veil trailing behind her in the evening breeze. She was crying again, and I felt the familiar ache of having caused my little sister pain, even if I had not intended to. Vanessa, I truly am sorry. She wiped at her eyes, smearing her makeup further. Are you though? Or are you actually kind of pleased that you got to prove everyone wrong in such a dramatic way? The question was uncomfortably perceptive. I had been pleased, at least initially, to see the shock on my parents' faces and the recognition that they had been wrong about me. But watching Vanessa's distress and Marcus's discomfort, and the disruption of what should have been a joyous celebration, the pleasure had curdled into something much more complicated. I did not plan for it to happen this way, I said. But I will not pretend I am sorry that everyone finally knows the truth about what I have built. I have been carrying the weight of being the family disappointment for 8 years, and it has been exhausting. You could have just told us, she said. At any point, you could have just said, actually, I co-founded a multi-million-dollar company and I am doing really well. Why did you have to let us all believe something that was not true? Because you all wanted to believe it, I said. It fit the narrative you preferred. I made a choice you disagreed with, so it must have led to failure and regret. Actual information to the contrary was not welcome because it would have meant admitting that maybe leaving medical school was not the catastrophic mistake you all decided it was. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. Did you really think we saw you as a failure? What else was I supposed to think? Dad talks about you with such pride. My daughter, the dermatologist. Vanessa just finished her residency. Vanessa is getting married to this wonderful young man with a PhD from Stanford. Me, he introduces as his other daughter who lives in Texas. The implication is always clear. Maybe you are reading implications that are not there. Maybe you are so defensive about leaving medical school that you interpret everything through that lens. It was possible she was right, at least partially. My own hurt and defensiveness probably colored how I interpreted my parents' words and actions. But it did not change the fundamental fact that they had never expressed genuine interest in my work or pride in my accomplishments. Vanessa, in 6 years of building Meridian, not once has either of our parents asked me about my company's name, my role there, how many people we employ, what kind of work we do, or whether I am happy with my choices. Not once. Do you really think I am misinterpreting a complete lack of curiosity about my professional life? She did not have an answer for that. We stood in silence, listening to the fountain and the distant sound of music from the ballroom. Finally, she said, I did not know you felt so invisible. I have felt invisible for a long time. Tonight was the first time in 8 years that anyone in our family has actually seen me clearly. And you are happy about that? Even though it ruined my wedding reception? Your reception is not ruined. It is just complicated now. People are talking about something unexpected. But you are still married to Marcus. You are still starting your life together. One dramatic revelation does not change that. She looked down at her wedding dress, at the beautiful expensive fabric that my parents had insisted on paying for. Marcus and I need to figure out what this means for his job. It is going to be weird for him to work for my sister. Maybe he should start looking for other positions. That is his decision to make, I said carefully. But I hope he does not leave Meridian because of this. He is an excellent data scientist, and I would hate to lose him from the team because of family awkwardness. You see how weird this is, right? You are talking about my husband as an employee. It is so strange. It was strange. I had hired Marcus based purely on his professional credentials, never imagining that he would become my brother-in-law. Now our professional relationship and our family relationship were entangled in ways that were going to require some careful navigation. We will figure it out, I said. People manage complicated family and professional relationships all the time. It just requires clear communication and appropriate boundaries. Vanessa laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Clear communication and appropriate boundaries. That is very businesslike, Becca. Very CTO of you. I have learned to be businesslike. It is how I have survived building a company, while feeling like my family was rooting for me to fail. We were not rooting for you to fail, she said, but again her voice lacked conviction. Then more quietly, I really did not know you felt this way. I thought you were happy doing your thing in Austin and that you just were not that close with the family anymore. I distanced myself because it hurt less than constantly being dismissed and compared unfavorably to you. She flinched. I never compared you to me. You did not have to. Everyone else did it for you. You were the good daughter who followed the right path. I was the cautionary tale about what happens when you make impulsive decisions. We were interrupted by Marcus appearing at the garden entrance. Vanessa, the wedding planner wants to know if we are ready for the cake cutting. And your parents are asking about family photos. Vanessa looked at me, her expression exhausted. Can we just get through the rest of tonight without any more revelations or confrontations? Can we just pretend to be a normal family for the remainder of my wedding? Of course, I said. I will stay out of the way. I will be the quiet sister in the corner who does not cause any more disruptions. That is not what I meant. But it is what will be easiest. Go cut your cake. Take your photos. Dance with your husband. I will be invisible again, which is what I am apparently good at. I walked past them back toward the ballroom, feeling drained and sad and vindicated and guilty all at the same time. The truth was out, which was what I had wanted on some level. But the cost of that truth was clear in Vanessa's tears and Marcus's discomfort, and the strained atmosphere that had replaced the earlier celebration. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Vanessa and Marcus cut their cake while everyone cheered and took photos. There were more dances, more toasts from friends who had not witnessed the earlier drama. My parents circulated among the guests, playing their roles as gracious hosts while avoiding any substantive interaction with me. I stayed at the periphery as I always did, watching my family perform happiness while processing information that fundamentally changed how they understood one of their own members. And I wondered whether the truth, however necessary it had been to reveal, would ultimately bring us closer together or push us further apart than we had ever been before. I left the reception at 10:30, citing an early morning flight that did not actually exist. Vanessa hugged me goodbye with a stiffness that spoke volumes about the unresolved tension between us, and Marcus shook my hand with the awkward formality of someone who had just discovered his boss was his new sister-in-law. My parents were nowhere to be found when I made my exit, having apparently decided that avoiding me was preferable to attempting another conversation that might reveal further uncomfortable truths. The drive back to my hotel took 15 minutes through Charleston's historic streets, gas lamps casting pools of golden light on cobblestone sidewalks. The city looked beautiful and timeless, the kind of place where families like mine had lived for generations, building legacies and maintaining traditions and expecting their children to color within carefully drawn lines. I had stepped outside those lines 8 years ago, and I was only now beginning to understand the full scope of what that transgression had cost me in terms of family connection. My hotel room was mercifully quiet and anonymous. I kicked off my heels, unzipped the bridesmaid dress, and changed into the comfort of yoga pants and an oversized MIT sweatshirt that Jennifer had given me as a joke after I delivered a guest lecture there last year. Then I sat on the bed and finally allowed myself to process everything that had happened. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. I scrolled through them systematically, categorizing them mentally as I went. There were messages from Jennifer demanding a full debrief. Several from colleagues at Meridian who had apparently heard something through various channels and were confused or curious or concerned. A few from distant relatives who had been at the wedding and wanted to express their surprise at my secret success. And one from Aunt Caroline that simply read, "I always knew you were special, honey. Your parents will come around. Give them time." I responded to Jennifer first, typing out a detailed summary of the evening's events. Her reply came back within seconds. "Holy shit. That is simultaneously the most dramatic and the most satisfying thing I have ever heard. How do you feel?" I considered the question seriously before responding. Exhausted, guilty, relieved, sad, all of it at once. You know none of this is your fault, right? They created a narrative about you without bothering to check if it was accurate. That is on them, not you. I could have corrected them at any point. You tried. They did not want to listen. There is only so much you can do when people are invested in believing a particular story about you. She was right, but it did not make me feel less guilty about the disruption to Vanessa's wedding. Whatever my justifications, the fact remained that my sister's reception had been derailed by revelations about my professional life, and I could have prevented that by being more proactive about transparency. I set my phone aside and opened my laptop, intending to distract myself with work email. Instead, I found myself opening a folder I had created years ago but rarely looked at. A collection of documents that chronicled the early days of Meridian Analytics. There were business plan drafts that Jennifer and I had written in coffee shops, our original pitch deck for investors, the incorporation paperwork, photographs from our first tiny office space that we had shared with 3 other startups. Looking at these artifacts from 6 years ago, I was struck by how young we looked in the photos, how ambitious and naive and determined. We had been 26 years old, armed with graduate degrees in data science and computer science respectively, convinced that we could build something meaningful in an industry that was not always welcoming to women founders. We had faced skepticism from investors, condescension from potential clients, and doubt from people who thought we were too young and too female to be taken seriously in the enterprise software space. But we had persisted. We had taken on projects that larger firms considered too small or too boring. We had delivered exceptional work and asked our satisfied clients to refer us to their colleagues. We had hired carefully, building a team of talented people who shared our values about both technical excellence and human decency. We had grown slowly and deliberately, refusing to sacrifice our culture for faster growth or compromise our standards for easier sales. And somewhere along the way we had built something remarkable. Meridian Analytics now had offices in Austin, San Francisco, Chicago, and Boston. We had worked with over 60 Fortune 500 companies. Our employee retention rate was exceptional in an industry known for high turnover. We had been profitable for 4 consecutive years, a rarity in the startup world where growth often came at the expense of sustainable business fundamentals. My family knew none of this. They knew I had left medical school, and they knew I worked with computers in Austin. Everything else was a blank space they had filled with assumptions rather than curiosity. I clicked through to another folder containing articles and profiles that had been written about Meridian over the years. There was a feature in Austin Business Journal about fastest-growing companies, a profile in a data science trade publication about innovative approaches to ensemble modeling, an interview I had done for a women in tech publication about building inclusive cultures in male-dominated fields, a case study about a project we had done for a healthcare company that used predictive analytics to improve patient outcomes. Each article represented moments of professional validation, recognition that what we were building mattered and had value. But I had never shared any of these articles with my family because I knew they would not really read them, would not understand what they represented, would find polite but distant ways to acknowledge them before changing the subject to Vanessa's latest accomplishment in medical training. The pattern had been established early. I remembered coming home for Thanksgiving during my first year of building Meridian, excited to tell my parents about landing our first major client. My father had listened for perhaps 90 seconds before interrupting to tell me about a complex surgery he had performed that week. My mother had smiled vaguely and asked if I was eating enough because I looked thin. Vanessa had been studying for her medical school exams and was too stressed to engage with anything not directly related to her own life. That Thanksgiving I had learned to stop trying to share my professional wins with my family. It hurt less to simply not offer information than to offer it and have it dismissed or ignored. So I had built an entire successful company in silence, sharing my victories and challenges with Jennifer and my team and my friends in Austin, letting my family continue to believe whatever they wanted to believe about my choices and my life. Now they knew, and I had no idea what happened next. I was pulled from my reflection by my phone ringing. I glanced at the screen and saw my mother's name. For a moment I considered not answering, but eventually I picked up. "Hello, Mom." "Rebecca." Her voice was tight and controlled, the tone she used when she was upset but trying to maintain composure. "Your father and I would like to speak with you. Can you come by the house tomorrow morning before you leave town? I have a flight at 11. This was a lie, but I needed an excuse to keep any conversation time limited. "Then come at 8. This is important." I wanted to refuse, to tell her that I was done having conversations where they made me feel small and inadequate. But ingrained habits of family obligation were difficult to break, and some part of me wanted to hear what they would say now that they understood the reality of my professional life. "I will be there at 8, I said. "Good. We will see you then." She hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down and returned my attention to the laptop screen, where an article about women founders in tech stared back at me. The journalist had asked me about challenges I had faced building Meridian, and I had given the diplomatic answer about occasional gender bias, but mostly focusing on the positive aspects of the Austin startup ecosystem. I had not mentioned my family's complete disinterest in what I was building. I had not talked about the loneliness of achieving professional success while feeling like personal failures in the eyes of the people who were supposed to know me best. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Rebecca, I want to apologize again for how things came out tonight. Vanessa and I have been talking, and we both recognize that the situation was complicated and not entirely your fault. I hope we can move forward professionally without too much awkwardness." I appreciated the sentiment, even as I recognized the careful phrasing that suggested he and Vanessa had discussed this extensively and settled on a diplomatic approach. I typed back, "No apology necessary. Let us touch base early next week to discuss any concerns you might have about reporting structure or potential conflicts of interest. We can figure this out." His response was immediate. "Thank you. That would be helpful. For what it is worth, I meant what I said earlier. You are an excellent leader and Meridian is a great company. I would hate for family stuff to impact my work there." "It will not," I wrote back, though I was not entirely sure that was a promise I could keep. How did you separate professional relationships from family dynamics when they collided so spectacularly? I spent another hour responding to messages and attempting to do actual work, but my concentration was fractured. Finally I gave up, closed the laptop, and lay back on the hotel bed staring at the ceiling. The events of the evening played on repeat in my mind. Daniel's toast, the shocked silence, my father's pale face, Vanessa's tears, the uncomfortable conversations that followed. But beneath the immediate drama, I found myself thinking about patterns that stretched back years. The way my parents had always compared Vanessa and me, the way I had been the promising older daughter until I made a choice they disagreed with, the way that single decision had apparently erased all the years of being a straight-A student and a perfect MCAT score and an acceptance to one of the best medical schools in the country. I thought about how they talked about me to their friends. "Our younger daughter is a dermatologist. Our older daughter lives in Texas." The asymmetry in those descriptions told you everything you needed to know about how they valued our respective paths. I thought about holidays and family gatherings where I had sat quietly while extended family asked Vanessa detailed questions about her residency, her patient cases, her career trajectory, while asking me only the most superficial questions about my life before turning their attention elsewhere. I thought about the relief I felt when I moved to Austin after leaving medical school. The liberation of being somewhere my family's expectations and disappointments could not reach me constantly. I had built a life in Texas that felt authentic and satisfying, surrounded by people who valued what I contributed and respected the choices I made. But I had also built that life in isolation from my family, maintaining only the most minimal connection because deeper engagement meant exposing myself repeatedly to their judgment and dismissal. I had chosen professional fulfillment over family approval, and I had told myself that was the right choice, the only choice possible given their unwillingness to accept my path. Now the two worlds had collided, and I could not predict what would emerge from the wreckage. Sleep came eventually, restless and dream-filled. I woke at 6:30 feeling groggy and emotionally raw. I ordered room service coffee and forced myself through a shower, then dressed in jeans and a casual blazer, the kind of outfit that split the difference between respectful and defiant. The drive to my parents' house took 20 minutes through Sunday morning Charleston, past churches with parking lots filling for early services, past the farmers' market setting up in Marion Square, past all the landmarks of my childhood that felt both familiar and alien now that I was so far removed from the life I had lived here. My parents lived in a large historic home in the Battery, the kind of address that carried social weight in Charleston's carefully maintained hierarchy. I had grown up in this house, knew every creaking floorboard and every photograph lining the hallway walls. But I had not slept here in over 5 years, preferring hotel rooms that did not come with the weight of family history and expectations. I parked on the street and sat in the rental car for a moment, steeling myself for whatever conversation awaited inside. Then I walked up the familiar path and knocked on the door that had been mine to open freely for the first 24 years of my life. My father answered, dressed in his weekend uniform of pressed khakis and a button-down shirt. He looked tired, older than I remembered from just yesterday, as if the revelations at the wedding had aged him overnight. "Rebecca, thank you for coming. Your mother is in the sunroom." He led me through the house to the bright back room where my mother sat with coffee and the Sunday paper spread across the wicker table. She looked up as I entered, and I saw the same exhaustion in her face that I had seen in my father's. "Sit down, please," she said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "Would you like coffee?" "I am fine, thank you." There was a long uncomfortable silence while they seemed to gather their thoughts. Finally my father spoke. "We owe you an apology, Rebecca. Your mother and I spent much of last night talking, and we have come to realize that we have not been as attentive to your life and your accomplishments as we should have been." The apology was so formal, so carefully worded, that it felt more like a legal statement than a genuine expression of remorse. But it was more than I had expected, and I felt myself soften slightly in response. "We did not realize you had built such a successful company," my mother added. "If we had known the scope of what you were doing, we would have been more supportive and engaged." "But that is exactly the problem," I said quietly. "You did not know because you never asked. You decided 8 years ago that leaving medical school was a catastrophic mistake, and you never updated that belief based on any actual information about how my life was unfolding." My father shifted uncomfortably. "That is not entirely fair. We did ask about your work. We asked how you were doing. You asked in the most superficial way possible. And whenever I tried to explain what Jennifer and I were building, I could see your eyes glaze over. You were not interested in understanding my work because it was not medicine, and in your worldview, nothing that is not medicine can be as valuable or worthwhile." "That is a harsh characterization," my mother said, but she did not deny it outright. "Is it? Name one thing you know about Meridian Analytics besides what you learned last night." Silence. They looked at each other, then back at me, unable to answer the question. "You cannot," I said, "because you have never asked. You do not know what services we provide, who our clients are, what my role entails, how many people we employ, or whether I enjoy my work. You know none of the details of my professional life because you have never been interested enough to inquire." "We are interested," my mother insisted. We have not known how to bridge the gap. After you left medical school, things became strained between us, and that strain made it difficult to communicate effectively. Things became strained because you made it clear you saw my choice as a betrayal and a failure. Every conversation we have had for 8 years has been colored by your disappointment. It was easier to stop trying to share my life with you than to constantly feel inadequate for not living up to your expectations. My father stood and walked to the window overlooking their garden. With his back to me, he said, "When you left Hopkins, we were devastated. You were following in our footsteps, becoming part of the family tradition of medicine. We had such pride in telling our colleagues that both our daughters were going to be doctors. And then suddenly you were not, and we did not understand why." I tried to explain why. I told you that I was miserable in medical school, that I had realized I was pursuing medicine because it was what you wanted rather than what I wanted, that I had discovered a genuine passion for data science and wanted to follow that instead. But you did not want to hear those reasons. You just wanted me to push through and finish. We thought you were making an impulsive decision, my mother said. We thought if you just gave it more time, you would rediscover your initial passion for medicine. I never had a passion for medicine. I had a passion for making you proud. Those are not the same thing. The words hung in the air between us, perhaps the most honest thing I had ever said to them about my decision to leave medical school. I had been a dutiful daughter who excelled at academics and standardized tests, and I had pursued medicine because that was what was expected, what was valued, what would earn the approval I craved from my high-achieving parents. But somewhere during my second year at Hopkins, I had taken an elective course in biostatistics and discovered that I loved the elegant logic of data analysis, the way patterns emerged from chaos when you applied the right analytical tools. I had started spending more time with the statistics and computer science students than with my medical school classmates. I had realized with growing certainty that I was training for the wrong career, that I could be good at medicine but would never love it the way my parents did. Leaving had been the hardest decision of my life, but also the most necessary. And my parents had never forgiven me for it. We did not know you felt that way, my mother said quietly. You were always such a dedicated student. We thought you genuinely wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to make you happy. I thought being a doctor would accomplish that. But I was 24 years old and miserable, and I finally had the courage to choose my own happiness over your approval. And you have been punishing us for not supporting that choice ever since, my father said, turning from the window to face me. The accusation stung because there was some truth to it. I had withdrawn from them, had kept them at arm's length emotionally, had allowed distance to grow until we were essentially strangers who shared DNA and occasional holiday meals. I have been protecting myself, I corrected. There is a difference. Every interaction with you felt like a reminder that I had disappointed you, that I was the less successful daughter, that my choices were incomprehensible and regrettable. I got tired of feeling that way, so I minimized contact. We never meant to make you feel that way, my mother said, and for the first time I heard genuine emotion in her voice rather than defensive formality. But you did. You compared me to Vanessa constantly. You introduced me to your friends in ways that minimized my existence. You asked about her life with genuine interest and about mine with perfunctory politeness. Maybe you did not intend to create that dynamic, but impact matters more than intent. My father sat back down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. We have made mistakes. I can see that now. We allowed our disappointment about your leaving medical school to color how we interacted with you, and we did not make sufficient effort to understand the life you were building instead. It was the closest thing to a real apology I had ever heard from him, and I felt tears threatening for the first time since the wedding reception. I blinked them back, not ready to be vulnerable in front of them yet. What happens now? I asked. Now that you know I am not actually a failure, what changes? Everything, my mother said firmly. We want to understand your work, your life, your company. We want to be genuinely engaged with what you have built. We want to repair the relationship that we allowed to deteriorate because of our own narrow-mindedness. That sounds good in theory. But relationships are not repaired through one conversation. They are repaired through consistent changed behavior over time. And I am not sure I have the energy for that process. We are asking for the chance to try, my father said. We are asking you to not write us off completely based on our past failures. I looked at these two people who had raised me, who had provided everything material I needed growing up, who had loved me in their way even as they struggled to accept my choices. They looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely interested in bridging the gap that had grown between us. But I had been disappointed by them so many times that I found myself reluctant to trust this moment of apparent understanding. I need time, I said. I need to process everything that happened last night and everything that led up to it. I cannot just flip a switch and suddenly trust that things will be different. We understand, my mother said. We are not asking for instant forgiveness or reconciliation. We are just asking for the opportunity to do better moving forward. I nodded slowly, not ready to commit to anything more substantial than that. We talked for another 30 minutes, the conversation gradually becoming less fraught as we moved from confrontation to cautious exploration. They asked questions about Meridian that they should have asked years ago, and I answered them, watching their expressions shift as they understood the scope and sophistication of what Jennifer and I had built. When I finally left their house at 9:30, I felt emotionally exhausted but also slightly hopeful. Perhaps the dramatic revelation at Vanessa's wedding, as disruptive as it had been, might actually create an opening for a more honest relationship with my family. Or perhaps this was just a temporary détente that would fade back into familiar patterns of dismissal and disappointment. Only time would tell. But for the first time in 8 years, I felt like my family was finally seeing me clearly rather than through the distorted lens of their expectations and assumptions. And that visibility, however uncomfortable it had been to achieve, felt like progress. I returned to Austin on Monday afternoon, having extended my stay in Charleston by one day to attend the promised Sunday brunch with extended family. The event had been surreal in ways I could not have anticipated. Relatives who had barely acknowledged my existence at previous gatherings suddenly wanted detailed conversations about my company, my role, my vision for the future of data analytics. Aunts and uncles who had previously offered sympathetic head shakes about my departure from medical school now congratulated me on my entrepreneurial success with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery winners. The shift in treatment was so dramatic it would have been comical if it were not also deeply depressing. Nothing about me had changed between Friday and Sunday except their knowledge of my financial success. I was the same person with the same accomplishments, but now those accomplishments were visible and valued in a way they had not been when people assumed I was merely employed at some forgettable tech company. Vanessa had been cordial but distant at the brunch, still processing the disruption to her wedding reception and the revelation about Marcus's employment. We had exchanged perhaps 20 words total, most of them pleasantries about the food and weather. Marcus had been equally polite and equally reserved, and I recognized that our working relationship would require some careful navigation in the weeks ahead. My parents had been attentive in a way that felt both gratifying and suspicious. They sat with me during the meal, asked questions about Meridian's business model and growth strategy, introduced me to relatives as their daughter, who had founded a successful data analytics firm. The pride in their voices when they said it felt genuine, but I could not shake the awareness that this pride was contingent on financial success rather than on my happiness or fulfillment or the courage it had taken to leave a path that was making me miserable. Jennifer met me at the Austin airport, her Honda Civic idling in the pickup lane as I emerged with my carry-on bag. She took one look at my face and said, "You need tacos and margaritas." Possibly in that order, possibly simultaneously. 20 minutes later we were sitting on the patio at our favorite Tex-Mex place on South Congress, enormous margaritas in front of us, and an order of queso fundido on the way. I had recounted the entire weekend in detail, and Jennifer had listened with increasingly wide eyes and occasional interjections of disbelief. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, squeezing lime into her margarita. "For 8 years your family has treated you like a failure. Then at your sister's wedding, everyone finds out you are actually wildly successful. Your parents suddenly want to be involved in your life. Your sister is married to our employee. And somehow you are feeling guilty about all of this? When you say it like that, it sounds absurd." "That is because it is absurd. Becca, you have nothing to feel guilty about. You built an incredible company while your family was too wrapped up in their own narrow worldview to notice or care. The fact that the truth came out dramatically is not your fault. You did not plan for Marcus's best man to mention you in a toast. But I could have prevented it. I could have told everyone months ago when I realized the connection. And would that have been better? Your family would have learned the truth in a private conversation instead of a public revelation, but the fundamental dynamic would have been the same. They would have had to confront the fact that they had been dismissive and wrong about you. At least this way, they could not minimize it or sweep it under the rug." She had a point. A private revelation might have been easier in some ways, but it also would have allowed my family to control the narrative more effectively, to frame my success as interesting but not particularly impressive compared to medical careers, to maintain their fundamental assessment that I had made questionable choices even if those choices had worked out financially. The public nature of the wedding revelation had made that kind of minimization impossible. 200 people had witnessed the disclosure that I ran a multi-million-dollar company. My parents' entire social circle now knew that the daughter they had pitted was actually more financially successful than most people in the room. There was no way to quietly diminish that reality. I am worried about Marcus, I said, changing the subject slightly. This has to be incredibly awkward for him. He is married to my sister, which means family gatherings are now work events in a weird way. What if he feels like he cannot be honest with me about work issues because I am family? What if he thinks he needs to leave Meridian because the situation is too complicated? Jennifer took a long sip of her margarita before responding. Those are legitimate concerns. But they are also concerns that can be addressed through clear communication and appropriate boundaries. Marcus is a professional. You are a professional. If you approach this thoughtfully, there is no reason why his marriage to your sister should impact his ability to do excellent work at our company. What if my family dynamics start affecting his performance? What if there is conflict between Vanessa and me, and it makes things weird for him at work? Then we deal with it like we would deal with any other personal situation that might affect an employee's work. We offer support, we maintain clear boundaries between personal and professional, and we trust Marcus to be an adult who can navigate complexity. You are catastrophizing, which I understand given how intense this weekend was, but you are also borrowing trouble that does not exist yet. The queso arrived, bubbling and perfect, and we both took a moment to appreciate it before continuing the conversation. Jennifer had been my closest friend since graduate school, had been there through my decision to leave medical school, had co-founded Meridian with me when we were both 26 and terrified and determined. She knew me better than anyone, which meant she could call me out on my tendency to assume worst-case scenarios. You are right, I acknowledged. I am catastrophizing. It is just that this feels so precarious. I have kept my professional life and my family life completely separate for so long. Now they are colliding in ways I cannot control, and I do not know how to navigate it. You navigate it the same way you navigate everything else. With integrity, clear communication, and appropriate boundaries. You are one of the most ethical leaders I know, Becca. You are not going to suddenly become inappropriate or unprofessional just because your employee married your sister. But what about family stuff? What if my parents want to visit Austin and tour the office? What if they start trying to be involved in Meridian in ways that feel intrusive? What if they want to meet our team or attend company events? Jennifer grinned. Then they will see firsthand what you have built, and how respected you are in your professional community. They will see 73 people who chose to work for you, who value your leadership, who have built something remarkable under your guidance. That does not sound like a bad thing to me. I had not thought about it that way. My instinct was to maintain the separation between my family and my work, to keep them from infiltrating the professional space where I felt competent and valued. But Jennifer was right that allowing them into that space might actually reinforce the lessons they had begun learning at the wedding. You know what I think the real issue is? Jennifer said, pointing a chip at me for emphasis. You are afraid that if you let your family get close, they will find new reasons to be disappointed in you. You are afraid that their newfound interest is conditional on continued financial success, and that if Meridian ever struggled or failed, they would go right back to seeing you as a disappointment. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. My parents' sudden pride and engagement felt fragile, contingent on metrics that could change. What happened if we had a bad quarter, or lost a major client, or faced any of the normal challenges that businesses encountered? Would they maintain their respect for my choices, or would they revert to suggesting that I should have stayed in medical school where I would have had stability and security? I do not trust that their change is permanent, I admitted. I feel like I am waiting for the other shoe to drop, for them to find new ways to be critical once the novelty of discovering I am successful wears off. That is understandable given your history with them. But you cannot live your life based on fear of potential future disappointment. All you can do is be clear about your boundaries, communicate honestly about your needs, and see if they are actually capable of sustained change. If they are not, then you will have clarity about the relationship and can make decisions accordingly. We finished our meal talking about other topics. Jennifer updated me on what had happened at the office while I was gone, mentioned a potential new client opportunity that had come through during the week, discussed some personnel matters that needed my attention. It was grounding to talk about work, to remember that I had an entire professional life that was separate from family drama. that I had built something meaningful that would continue regardless of how my relationship with my parents evolved. When I finally returned to my condo in the Clarksville neighborhood, I felt steadier than I had in days. The space was exactly as I had left it, my sanctuary of modern furniture and clean lines and windows overlooking downtown Austin. I had bought this place 3 years ago when Meridian's success made it clear I could afford something nicer than the small apartment I had been renting. It was the first space that felt truly mine, chosen and decorated according to my preferences rather than handed down or shared or temporary. I spent Tuesday morning catching up on work that had accumulated during my absence. There were client emails to respond to, project updates to review, strategic decisions to make about resource allocation for the quarter ahead. The familiar rhythm of work was comforting, a reminder that I was good at something, that I had built expertise and credibility that existed independent of my family's opinions. Marcus was scheduled to return to the office on Wednesday. I sent him a calendar invitation for a one-on-one meeting Thursday morning, adding a note that we should discuss any concerns he had about our working relationship given the family connection. His response was quick and professional. "Thank you for being proactive about this. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss. See you Thursday." Wednesday morning I arrived at the office early, as was my habit. Meridian occupied the entire 4th floor of a renovated warehouse building in East Austin. An open floor plan punctuated by glass-walled conference rooms and collaboration spaces. We had designed the space intentionally to foster both focused individual work and spontaneous team interaction, and I still felt a surge of pride every time I walked in and saw our team engaged in the work we had all committed to doing together. Several team members greeted me as I made my way to my office in the corner. Sarah-chan, one of our senior analysts, stopped me to ask about the wedding. I gave her the abbreviated version, acknowledging that my sister had married Marcus, and that it had been surprising for everyone to discover the connection. She laughed and said that at least now Marcus would have insider information about company culture to share with his new wife, which was not entirely inaccurate. Jennifer appeared at my office door mid-morning with 2 coffees and a determined expression. "Okay, we need to talk strategy. Not about family stuff, about actual business stuff. The potential client I mentioned at dinner is more serious than I initially thought. They want to meet with us next week to discuss a major engagement." She outlined the opportunity, a Fortune 100 healthcare company that was looking for a partner to help them build out their predictive analytics capabilities for patient outcomes. It was exactly the kind of high-profile, high-impact project we loved, the kind that combined technical complexity with genuine potential to improve people's lives. It was also a significant undertaking that would require careful planning and substantial resource allocation if we won the contract. "This could be transformative for us," Jennifer said, her excitement evident. "Not just financially, though the contract value would be substantial, but in terms of reputation and the caliber of work we would get to do. Healthcare analytics is an area we have been wanting to expand into more deliberately, and this would give us a flagship project to build on." "What is their timeline?" "They want to make a decision within 6 weeks. We would be competing against 2 other firms, both larger than us. But they specifically mentioned that they were impressed with our approach to ensemble modeling and our track record of delivering projects on time and within budget. We have a real shot at this." We spent the next 2 hours strategizing about the proposal, discussing which team members would be best suited to lead the work, debating pricing strategies and project timelines. It was the kind of high-level business conversation that I loved, where Jennifer's operational expertise and my technical knowledge combined to create something greater than either of us could achieve alone. This was what I had left medical school for. Not just to work with data, but to build something from nothing, to create an organization that did excellent work while treating people with dignity and respect, to have agency over my professional trajectory in ways that would have been impossible within the hierarchical structures of medicine. And I had succeeded. Whatever my family thought about my choices, whatever awkwardness now existed between my professional and personal lives, I had built something remarkable. Marcus returned to the office Wednesday afternoon. I saw him briefly in passing, and we exchanged professional nods and brief greetings. He looked tired, which was understandable given that he had just gotten married and immediately returned to work, but his demeanor was friendly and normal. Whatever complexity existed in our new relationship, he seemed prepared to maintain professional boundaries and conduct himself appropriately. Thursday morning I arrived at the office to find an email from my mother waiting in my inbox. The subject line read Meridian Analytics, and I opened it with some trepidation. Dear Rebecca, your father and I have been doing research about your company since our conversation on Sunday. We read several of the articles you have been featured in and looked at your company website. We are both deeply impressed by what you have built, and somewhat ashamed that we knew so little about it. We would like to visit Austin sometime in the next few months to see your office and meet your colleagues if you would be comfortable with that. We want to understand this part of your life better. We also want to apologize again for not being more engaged and supportive over the past 8 years. We are committed to doing better moving forward. With love, Mom. I read the email 3 times, analyzing the tone and word choice, looking for hidden criticism or conditional statements. But it seemed genuine, a sincere expression of regret and desire to repair our relationship. I did not know how to feel about it. Part of me was gratified that they were making an effort. Part of me was angry that it had taken 8 years and a dramatic public revelation for them to show genuine interest in my life. And part of me was simply tired, exhausted by the emotional labor of processing my family dynamics on top of running a demanding business. I drafted a response, deleted it, drafted another version, deleted that one too. Finally, I settled on something brief and non-committal. Thank you for your email. I appreciate your willingness to learn more about Meridian. I will let you know when might be a good time for a visit. The next few weeks will be busy as we are working on a major proposal, but perhaps we can find a time in the coming months. Marcus arrived for our scheduled meeting at 10 o'clock, looking professional in dark jeans and a button-down shirt, our company's typical business casual uniform. He sat across from my desk with a notepad and a slightly apprehensive expression. Thank you for making time for this conversation, I began. I think it is important that we address the elephant in the room directly and establish clear boundaries and expectations, given that you are now married to my sister. I agree completely, he said. Vanessa and I have talked about this extensively over the past few days. We both want to make sure that our family relationship does not create any complications for my position here at Meridian. I appreciate that. Let me start by being very clear about something. Your performance, your opportunities for advancement, your compensation, and your standing at this company will be based entirely on your professional contributions and merit. The fact that you are married to my sister will not give you any advantages, nor will it create any disadvantages. I will hold you to the same standards I hold every other senior team member to. I would not want it any other way, he said firmly. One of the things I value most about working here is the culture of fairness and merit-based recognition. I would hate to have that compromise because of a family connection. Good. That said, we need to acknowledge that there will likely be some awkward moments. If there are conflicts or tensions in my relationship with Vanessa, you may be caught in the middle. If my parents become more involved in my life and want to visit the office, you might feel uncomfortable. We need to establish clear communication about when situations are starting to feel problematic, so we can address them proactively. Marcus nodded, taking notes. That makes sense. Can I suggest that we have regular check-ins specifically about this issue? Maybe monthly one-on-ones where we explicitly discuss whether the family dynamic is creating any concerns or complications. That is an excellent idea. I will add a standing monthly meeting to our calendars. And Marcus, if at any point you feel like the situation has become untenable, if you feel like you need to leave Meridian because the family connection is too complicated, I want you to tell me directly. I will understand and I will provide excellent references and support for your transition. I do not want you to feel trapped here because leaving would create family drama. He looked relieved. Thank you for saying that. It is honestly one of my biggest concerns. I love working here. The projects are interesting, the team is great, and I respect your and Jennifer's leadership enormously. But I also recognize that if things get complicated with family dynamics, it might be better for everyone if I found another position. I hope it does not come to that, I said honestly. You are a valued member of this team, and I would hate to lose you. But I also recognize that family relationships are more important than jobs, and I would never want you to sacrifice your relationship with Vanessa because of work complications. We talked for another 30 minutes, discussing specific scenarios that might arise and how we would handle them. What if my parents wanted to have dinner with both of us when they visited Austin? We agreed that would be fine as long as we maintained professional boundaries in our conversation and did not discuss confidential company matters. What if there was a conflict between Vanessa and me that Marcus was aware of? He would maintain neutrality and not share information from one side to the other, unless explicitly asked and appropriate. What if I needed to give him critical feedback about his work? I would deliver it exactly as I would to any other employee, and he would receive it professionally without bringing family dynamics into the conversation. By the end of the meeting, I felt significantly better about the situation. Marcus was mature and thoughtful, and he clearly wanted to navigate this complexity appropriately. We would not be able to anticipate every possible complication, but we had established a foundation of open communication and clear boundaries that would serve us well moving forward. The rest of Thursday was consumed by preparation for the healthcare analytics proposal. Jennifer had assembled a core team to work on the response, and we spent hours in conference rooms whiteboarding approaches, debating technical strategies, and refining our understanding of what the client needed. It was energizing work, the kind of collaborative problem-solving that reminded me why I loved what I did. Friday morning, I received a text from Vanessa. It was the first direct communication from her since I had left Charleston, and I opened it with some anxiety about what it might contain. Becca, I have been thinking a lot about everything that happened at the wedding. I am still processing it all, and I am not going to pretend that I am not hurt about how things unfolded. But I also recognize that the situation was complicated and that you were in a difficult position. Marcus and I talked to a therapist yesterday about how to navigate the family and work overlap, and she suggested that you and I might benefit from having our own conversation with a neutral third party present. Would you be open to that? Maybe when you are back in Charleston next, or we could do it over video if that is easier. The suggestion surprised me. Vanessa had never been particularly interested in therapy or processing emotional dynamics in structured ways. The fact that she was suggesting it now indicated that she was taking the situation seriously and wanted to work toward resolution rather than letting resentment fester. I typed back, "I think that could be helpful. I am open to it. Let me know what would work best logistically." Her response came quickly. "Thank you. I will work with a therapist to set something up and send you some potential times. I love you, Becca. This is all really weird and hard, but I do not want to lose you as my sister over it." The message made my throat tight. Whatever complications existed in our relationship, whatever hurt and misunderstanding had accumulated over years, Vanessa was still my sister. We had shared a childhood and a family history. We had been close before the dynamics of comparison and differential treatment had created distance between us. Maybe with intentional effort and professional guidance, we could rebuild something healthier than what we had before. I responded, "I love you too, and I do not want to lose you either. Let's figure this out." The weekend passed in a blur of proposal work. Jennifer and I met at a coffee shop on Saturday to review drafts and refine our strategy. Sunday I worked from home, reviewing technical specifications and ensuring our approach was both innovative and feasible. By Sunday evening, I felt confident that we had put together a compelling proposal that showcased our capabilities and demonstrated genuine understanding of the client's needs. Monday morning at the office, I gathered the proposal team to review the final draft before submission. The conference room was full of our best people, each contributing their expertise to different aspects of the response. As I looked around the table, I felt profound gratitude for what we had built together. These were talented professionals who had chosen to work at Meridian, who believed in what we were doing, who brought their best selves to work every day. This was my real family in many ways, not bound by blood or obligation, but by shared values and mutual respect and commitment to building something meaningful together. Whatever happened with my parents and Vanessa, whatever complications arose from the collision of my personal and professional worlds, I had this community of people who valued me for who I actually was rather than who they thought I should be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.